All right, class, let's talk about Rococo painting, which originated in the early 18th century Paris. It is characterized by soft colors and curvy lines and depicts scenes of love, nature, amorous encounters, lighthearted entertainment, and youth. The word Rococo derives from rocaille, a French word for rock or rubble. All right, class, let's get going. This is Watteau's painting of Journey to Cythera. Watteau's painting mirrors the elegance of the open-air parties that were popular in the 18th century court society. Elegant couples acted out polite rituals of behavior and conversation, where true meanings and desires were discreetly hidden. The couples appear in contemporary dress, but Watteau transports them to a fantasy world, the world that these people strove to achieve in their imagination. He depicts the journey to Cythera, the island sacred to Venus, the goddess of love, who is said to have alighted there after her birth. The painting is one of the finest fruits of Rococo art, the style that dominated all the arts in the first half of the 18th century. So if we look at this painting, over here on the left-hand side is a boat transporting, young lovers to the island, where these small angel cupids are flying all around and shooting people with arrows. Love arrows. These people on the island, are falling in love. Over here is a statue of Venus on the right-hand side with Cupid, and you've got the cherubs, or they're actually called putti, flying around. At the base of this statue are weapons, indicating, since they're at the base, that love triumphs over all even warfare. Great Rococo art. All right, let's take a look at Candiletto's masterpiece, The Arrival of the French Ambassadors. Candiletto's early masterpiece shows one of the most celebrated views in the world. This is the heart of Venice, once a great maritime empire and trading nation. By the time Candiletto painted this picture in the early 18th century, Venice was past her greatness and indeed was soon to lose her independence when, in 1797, the last of the rulers, the Doge of Venice, surrendered to Napoleon. Candiletto was a highly successful artist, a view painter or vendusta, and his works were eagerly sought after by the grand tourists of the period who traveled to Italy for education and pleasure. So a few of the highlights from this painting. There's quite a lot going on. In the background back here is the customs house. So when you entered into the port of Venice, you had to pass through there. And once again, Venice was huge in trading, especially with the Middle East, and made them very, very wealthy. Down here you have the French ambassadors arriving. In the background, you have a library that was built from the wealth of Venice. Behind it, you can see just the peak of the top right there is the mint, where they controlled the currency for the entire Mediterranean region. Up here you have a balcony that's packed with people, and that is showing how inquisitive people were to outsiders and to strangers. This is the actual entrance into the Grand Canal, where most of the traffic, once unloaded from the ships, was sent for trading. In the background, you can see there's nice open air on the left-hand side, but over here on the right, it's very dark clouds, and that is right above where the Doge or the Doge meetings took place, and that is foreboding, because Napoleon took over soon after, showing that it was time up for the rulers of Venice once Napoleon came around. All right, let's take a look at the painters. And Fragonard's work was Fragonard was one of the most prolific painters of his era. However, only 5 of his 550 plus paintings have been dated. His canvases are considered to be the embodiment of hedonistic, exuberant, and light-hearted Rococo art style, and one look at the bathers will give an understanding of why he is considered the master of his style. Fragonard's work was heavily influenced by his trips to Italy, where he studied the Dutch masters such as Rubens and Rembrandt, and it made a lasting impression on his work. When he returned to France, Fragonard started to work for wealthy patrons who preferred the scenes of love and nature rather than religious themes. The Bathers is an excellent example of Fragonard's work, where that he did for wealthy patrons. 8 women sitting on the edge of a stream with light gently falling upon them. The gaiety and frivolity of the scene is borderline erotic, but it was his energetic brushwork and the tender beauty he used to depict his subjects that made his work acceptable rather than offensive. When many of his patrons were executed during the French Revolution, Fragonard decided to leave Paris and seek his fortune elsewhere. However, he died completely forgotten for more than half of a century. His name was omitted even from the art history books of that time, but as you can tell, he is one of the greatest of the Rococo artists. All right, let's take a look at this portrait, The Swing by Fragonard. This picture was commissioned by a Baron St. Julien who wanted a picture of his mistress on a swing. He actually made the request to the artist, I would like you to paint the Madame seated on the swing being pushed by a bishop. With this odd request turned down by many other painters, Fragonard leapt to the occasion, producing what became the most iconic work of French Rococo art. In the foreground, the playboy Baron himself is, sitting on the ground down here, reclining in the lush shrubbery, one arm outstretched towards his maiden skirts, his other arm holding his balance. He gave very specific instructions to the artist, place me in a position where I can observe the legs of this charming girl. So, obviously he's sitting right here for a reason, so he can see his lovely mistress. His mistress flies through the air on a Sylvian swing, the lovely young lady giving herself away to the frivolous abandon, so much so that her shoe is flying off during the heat of the moment of the upward swing. In the background of this composition, one can see what was originally going to be a bishop, requested by the perverse baron, but which changed to the mistress's actual husband. So the husband is actually back here giving her the swing. The husband plays a lesser role, being immersed in the shadows, back here behind a tree or whatever, whereas the baron is illuminated under the maiden's dress. So you can see that this painting also has some of the cherubs back here, the little cupids, and you also have a statue up here indicating love in this picture. All right, let's look at Boucher's Madame Pompadour. Jean-Antoinette Poussin, the Madame de Pompadour, was Boucher's patron, and, as numerous paintings show, one of his favorite subjects. He painted nearly a dozen pictures of Madame de Pompadour, not counting the numerous Dianas and Venuses, which reflect her facial features. From this picture from 1756 shows Madame de Pompadour not in her role as a mistress to King Louis XV, but as an intellectual and supporter of the Enlightenment. She is posed as if interrupted in reading a book, and her writing table nearby is fully supplied with a quill inserted in the inkwell. The room is scrumptiously decorated with heavy Damascus curtains. In the rear is a handsomely carved bookcase, further evidence of this lady's intellectual abilities. Boucher is most famous for his nudes, so it comes as somewhat of a surprise to find Madame de Pompadour in this portrait so fully clothed. Obviously, one reason for that is to give the artist full range to paint this beautiful dress with its rose frills and pleats. Boucher clearly idealized Pompadour almost like a porcelain doll, and pays attention to the ample silken costume, reflections of an opulence somewhat contradictory to the age of reason, which is an overt message of this gorgeous picture. All right, let's take a look at Chardin's The Governess. Chardin's world was that of the enlightened bourgeoisie who were gaining influence in the mid-18th century France, and his paintings are glimpses of their world. He was influenced by the genre scenes and still lifes of the Dutch masters of the 17th century, whose paintings were in fashion with the French collectors of the time. This picture was exhibited at the Paris Salon, and although modest in size and subject, it was greatly admired. Chardin's technique, and in particular his meticulous craftsmanship and perfect sense of color, are always in harmony with subject matter. It is in this sense of total unity where nothing is out of place. Nothing is overstated that makes him a great master. Chardin reminds us that looking at people and objects can be one of life's greatest pleasures. So in looking at this painting, in the middle you have this young boy who's off to school, oftentimes the governess. So this would be, in our day and age, like a nanny or a maid. It has taken care of the child up until this age, and now he's got his books under his arm and he's off to school. She's making sure that he's prim and proper by cleaning his hat off before he goes to school. The open door back here is an indication that his next step is going to be towards manhood. Down here at the bottom left-hand corner are the games that children would play, and they're on the floor, indicating that it's time to move on and childhood is slowly fading for this young man. Once again, this is called The Governess. It's one of Chardin's great paintings from France.